We're Homo sapiens, and that's about 8 steps down.
I ain't. I just want to make clear, because this is going out on the TV or whatever, that I don't do that stuff. I ain't got nothing against it.
Oh, it's the homo that threw him off. I mean, explain that.
Yeah. It is a scientific nomenclature that describes who we are as part of a phyla or a stream of, it goes hominid, hominoid, and then we go
whatever. There's different names for it.
We're all Homo sapiens.
All humans would be considered.
My wife is a Homo sapien.
But that's not homosexual.
We're all
that's what the difference is.
Yeah, well, it's just a way of describing who we are.
Well, that's it. I just want to make clear your respect for coming on, and I ain't going to treat you differently now that has come out. That's safe.
No, it has nothing to
come out.
Come on now, you're confused here. Let's settle the confusion. All of people in the whole world, the biologists have in a group called Homo. And the particular human group below that is sapiens. And all that is Greek. It just means the Greek word for man smart.
Yeah, a lot of them is very talented.
It has nothing to do with homosexuals. It has nothing to do with the homos that you meet on the street. It's an entirely different lingo.
But
my point is...
So is you one of the homo lot?
I am a Homo sapien. I think all humans are Homo sapiens. You are too. Okay? You are too.
Yo.
The term homo and Homo sapien has nothing at all to do with sex.
All right.
That's funny. I don't know, what would... I don't know if there is an intersect for Bacharach and 4AD. There probably is somewhere in there. All right. So yeah, I mean, this is in relatively basic, overview of a hugely important label. I mean, it's weird because 4AD became so big. You mean it was always connected. So, I mean, all right. Ivo Watts Russell starts out working at Beggar's Banquet it's almost like after punk. And he and Neil Grierson are, they're working in the record store and whatever. And basically the idea is there's so many bands. So the whole independent record notion, independent record label notion, it happens because of punk, because there's all of a sudden, there were 50 or 60 bands and now there's 500, and it just became impossible from punk and then, shortly after new wave, and just the idea that you could go through the process of creating a record and being a band and not be like this enormous, project or whatever, just get it done faster, have more activity, more press cycles, more turnover. You only need a 7-inch. That really drives the whole thing. And so essentially 4AD, similar to a lot of, new labels, they're really just an A&R shop. The idea is that Ivo and Neil can go out and they can find, more bands and be filters and get the bands going. And then, they'll get signed to Beggars Direct. I mean, this was totally explicitly a strategy. It's not like, this isn't like Tony and Factory where it's like he got an inheritance and he wanted to do this thing. And this was really pointedly an A&R sub-imprint of Beggars. And, if you go through it historically, it's an extremely dramatic series of phases in terms of what 4AD started as and what they did. Because initially, and the other thing too, is, and there's the only other thing, there's like 500,000 topics you could talk to. There's the design aspect with Von Oliver and Briggs, what's his name? Chris Briggs. I'm so sorry, I forget. V23, and they become an enormously important part of 4AD. But the idea that 4AD is like, the way Factory is twinned with, Joy Division, New Order, and to a very, very lesser extent, Happy Mondays. It's harder to do that with 4AD. A lot of people would think 4AD is just Cocteau Twins because from the back half of the 80s, from the mid 80s to the 90, Cocteau Twins were doing really well, but so were lots of other 4AD artists. So it's really strange. You mentioned, yeah, so there's a comment in the chat about Ivo. You know, look, the thing about Ivo Watts Russell is that he, right from the outset, his mindset toward artists and bands is pretty horribly exposed. And it's you know, he's not an altruist. He's an A&R minded person. He's very like sort of strategic and almost, like, he's extraordinarily creative, right? So Ivo starts his own sort of band, kind of just pulling people from within 4AD, called This Mortal Coil. The reason I mention that at the top is that happened because he had a disagreement with one of his bands, Modern English. So like, let's say I'm running a record, well, let's say I'm part of a record label, right? But, you know, we've got this band, like, let's say Krause is doing this song live, right? And Will Krause is like, well, you know, I don't know if this song should be this way or that way. And I'm like, no, it should be, you know, you should really do this song and this song in a row, and it should be this way. And he's like, nah, I don't want to do that. We're not going to do that. So what do? I go form my own band to do it. Like, what the fuck? It's so messed up. Like, and like, look, there's no acrimony that's like documented, but basically Modern English would do a medley of a couple of their tunes at the end of their set, and he loved it. It was like the thing he loved about them. And they didn't want to record it for their album that way, so he forms his own band to do it, which is totally bizarre. And look, there's lots of other examples that, like, I don't want to go negative about the guy's a fucking legend, but like, you know, even with like Belly, when Belly gets signed, that was a little bit, there's a kind of a little bit of a tone to what was going on there. If you read the stories, read Kristen Hirsch's Rat Girl, she doesn't have a bad word to say about anybody, but like, look, Ivo was kind of, he was crushing on those gals. I'm sorry. There's no question that he was crushing on Tanya Donnelly and Kristen Hirsch. And I mean, like, who wasn't? It was ridiculous. They were like just crazy. They just had such a unique energy at the start, and it just seemed like such a crazy thing. Anyway, so yeah, 4AD starts, like I say, this is essentially an A&R project, fully funded inside Beggar's Banquet. So think about Chris Perry. I mean, there's no comparison. These two guys, they're like kids. And you know, where like Chris Perry starts Fiction Records inside Polydor, that's how they cover punk. He signs the Sex Pistols, they break that contract, he signs the Jam, he signs Susie, he signs the Cure. Similarly, this is something Beggars wants to do, and they think Ivo can do it. So they go out there and they're focused on Bauhaus. Basically, 4AD is established as a training wheels program to try and make Bauhaus a real band. It's Bauhaus, Modern English, and the Matt Johnson. And Matt Johnson is like, he doesn't even know what he wants to do, but nobody cares because of the voice. Like, he's one of the greatest, most powerful singers ever. And the fact that the as a band, as the, you know, the sort of mononym, whatever, for Matt Johnson, the pen name or whatever for Matt Johnson's work, the fact that it's sort of like no matter what he did, if he sang on it, it's the. And he did so many different things. And it's not just that his voice was so unique, it's that his voice was so incredibly versatile. If you listen to when he starts singing, like, you know, he has this tragedy later in his career. I believe his brother dies. I'm pretty sure that's what happens. And when he does this, you know, this signature album, Dusk, which is one of my favorite albums of the 90s for sure. But like leading up to that in the 80s, he starts out as your typical kind of Ian Broody, you know, like twangy, plucking, new wavy guy, with Uncertain Smile and the really early stuff. You know, everybody's figuring it out. There's so many new sounds. There's so many new ideas going around. A lot of these artists, their evolution just in, like, let's say from 80 to 80, even 2, is absolutely breakneck. It's unbelievable how different and sketchy, really. Like, Bauhaus starts out like, it's a David Bowie situation. Peter Murphy is just like, you know, a photocopy, a mimeo of David Bowie. And they're covering Bowie. Like, it's really explicit. And they do Telegram Sam. You know, famously, this is one of the really early Bauhaus singles. That band starts out with a really different and classical kind of, glam rock notion, but make it dark. You know what I mean? And the weird thing is that the song they're most famous for, and is probably almost certainly now, and certainly in America, Bela Lugosi's Dead, is just like considered a kind of a jam. Like, they didn't consider that a definitive, like, that's what we sound like. They almost considered it like a one-off. And sort of the battle between the members of Bauhaus over what they were going to evolve into is the reason they don't stay together, because Peter Murphy's an egomaniac, and Daniel Ash is fucking great looking too, and unfortunately doesn't have as strong a voice. But they had really, everyone is really willful. And these independent labels, the reason I'm going on about that is these independent labels allow for that. The lack of structure, the lack of historical understanding of what happens to bands. Like, hey, we're going in on our third album and the drummer's drinking too much. Like, the people at Capitol Records seen that a bunch. Like, they have A&R people in management who can manage these problems. When you have Tony Wilson and you have like Iva Watts Russell and you have these people who don't know what the fuck they're doing, there's parity with the management, with the label itself and the bands. And that's a recipe for fucking disaster. So the idea that 4AD actually lasts at all is, that in itself is one of the craziest things about 4AD, because that circumstance of whether or not the people are the same age or not, it's about experience. If you don't have the experience and you only have the fantasy of starting a label, you're in for a lot of like pain and disappointment. And that experience is so crushing. Like, I've known so many people who've run labels, pretty big labels, like that you will have heard of, in terms of American independent records and stuff, especially in the 90s, bands that did relatively well. And yet it's just everyone, the same classic tensions and, distortions and misunderstandings. They all keep happening. And it's so strange. That's the thing. When you learn it, when you look back on labels like this, you're just like, how the fuck did it happen? In 4AD's case, it's because Beggars is helping. So they have a leg up big time. So they start out, like I said, you got Bauhaus, you got the classic, the original, like one that comes out is Dark Entries. And if you don't know this song, it is an absolutely signature bit of like, it's still post-punk. It's informed by Joy Division, sure, but it's like, it's really hissing. It's really like this serpentine kind of thing, and it really kind of nicely heralds. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Like, if you read the book, How Soon Is Now, if you read My Magpie Eye, it's like all the stories of the cartel and the 80s and this whole period. Like, everything is essentially, there's one band that's legitimately selling enough to make money, and the entire record industry, the cartel they called it, is essentially siphoning that money to keep all this other crap going. And that's why the Smiths and Morrissey were so pissed off, coming out of Rough Trade, is that fully by 1986, Jeff Travis was funding all of Rough Trade with Smith's record sales. It's the same way Wilson and Factory paid for the Hacienda and all the bullshit records they put out with New Order's profits. And it's all in the name of art, darling. And the band that's sitting there so distinguished and having so much more success than anyone else on their label is just like, fuck you. Like, it's a really classic scenario. It happens on all these labels. It happened with the Cocteaus on 4AD in the late 90s. They were absolutely sick of carrying the kind of cross of 4AD's, persistently goth image. But yeah, if you wanted to collect 4AD as a label, one, CD is absolutely your only shot. The problem is that they're starting in before CD exists. So you're really going to be dealing with reissues, compilations, etc. for the most part. They, the sort of early stuff in the Flat Field, is even, I think, is that the first LP? I think that's the first album proper that 4AD releases. But, you know, it's great. There's a bunch of reissues of it out there. Double Dare is a classic. It's not, I mean, they become a much stronger band in my view relatively quickly after that. But, you know, one of the early standouts is Diff Juz. If you're not familiar with Diff Juz, like, and you're into, you know, sort of post-rock, new wave, whatever, this band was absolutely phenomenal. This 12-inch Roy's Tray is just an all-time classic. If you want to talk about just like generally independently minded artists, Diff Juz was outstanding. It's, you know, like, you think about a certain ratio, bands that were trying to take inspiration not just from the very one-dimensional aspects of punk, but like other music, you know, like funk music, especially Northern Soul. Diff Juz is doing that sort of, I would say they did it the best of anyone. And so they did have an album, compilation album, but it's of like it's of the more like, whatchamacallit, like ephemeral stuff. To the key thing of their post-punk sound, the band sound here, this doesn't get that issue. And so finding their stuff is a little bit difficult in that way. But it's, you know, because they also change their style so much. They really do move into, I mean, they start out really intensely and then they kind of have this breaking kind of band place. I found it very hard trying to collect 4AD. I would imagine it would be really, really difficult because the parts of 4AD that are easy to collect don't feel like 4AD. Like, and so that's sort of a weird part of it. Robin Guthrie producing Diff Juz and not getting paid for it. Exactly. Those early kind of tension things like, oh, well, it'll all come out in the wash. Don't worry about that. And so one of the early giveaways is that they were huge Wire fans and they had wanted to sign Wire. So when Wire breaks up, all of these fledgling young label, you know, hit people are like, ah, and, you know, unfortunately, the stuff that Gilbert Lewis and Colin Newman were doing, it was so absurdist and indulgent that, you know, like provisionally entitled The Singing Fish. Colin does 2 records. One of the records that comes out under his name is essentially a Wire album called A to Z. And Not To is also really good. I love the song Lorries. This is such a great tune, and Safe too. Not To as well, the title track. So, you know, this is sort of like a licensing thing more than it is like 4AD, but it just shows you that Wire were one of their inspirations, is why I mention it. And that's what happens, you know, to set this label up. You know, you're starting out, let's try and make Bauhaus a real band, and they get to Mask, and it's like getting a little bit of like they're becoming a real band, but there's no, you know, there's no hits. It's like, you know, record magazine critic stuff still. Burning Blue Soul comes out, right? And people are like, oh, well, this guy's like this new talent, whatever. But you don't have like hits. You don't, all of this stuff is just Beggar's Banquet is letting you sign this stuff and put it out. That all changes in '83, which is when Modern English has an enormous hit in America. Which is I Melt With You. So after The Snow comes out, and it comes out in '82, and this gets picked up essentially by like the John Hugheses of the world and becomes this absolute synergistic college rock hit in America. And at that point, now 4AD can start like deciding things because they've been with Modern English from the word go, and that's why I opened talking about that. That's the first band I've always like, this band's going to go somewhere. And it took a while, and there was a lot of, you know, pretty indulgent, difficult and not necessarily successful stuff put out in the interim. Like I say, Diff Juz was really the kind of the heaviest contributing thing outside of Bauhaus they had going. The Birthday Party is still just like a skronking one-off. You know, Prayers on Fire is the one that brings them through, but it's as like a completely harsh, you know, like Nick the Stripper, like it's the way that this band ends up getting perceived just a few years later versus how they're read and responded to initially, you know, it's it's totally night and day. Honestly, like Nick Cave's whole thing, it's the '82 album that really launches it and makes it like incredible. I mean, these are the two strongest enduring for me of their sound, but this isn't selling records. This is like controversy. This is you think they blundered Melt With You? You mean in terms of the production? Because I don't mean to be teachy, but they did re-record it in the 90s. That was horrific. They did like a really awful commercial re-recording of that song for the CD edition. Yeah, Facing the Other Way by Martin. That's a good call out. The book Facing the Other Way by Martin Aston. And when you talk about books, I do have like a whole bunch of 480 stuff. I mean, I got the second V23 art book for Von Oliver stuff. This is for the Los Angeles exhibit from '93, I think, and there was a Paris exhibit in '91. But this is the actual full original art tome. It was '94. It's written right on it, but it's a compendium of stuff from that late '80s period with the Pixies and everything that was so crucial and transformative. And that's something else about this whole early period up until the Cocteaus start to come together, up until the modern English hit with I Melt With You. There's no, like, the design language is awful, which is just ironic and funny because 4AD becomes possibly the most signature aesthetic record label in terms of the presentation and the goth, weight of the branding, the image that gets stuck on you. Like, tons of bands wouldn't want to sign to 4AD for that reason, even more than Factory. Like, yeah, Factory's pretentious and Teutonic, and there's all these things you can say about Savile and Factory's approach, but like 4AD was even worse because it was just so consistently the same feel. And it was like you were just dealing with Von Oliver's crew working through, they're taking out their design inspiration on 4AD's bands. Interestingly, though, so I Melt With You, the money starts coming in. Cocteaus have the first record, Garlands, in '82. At this point, it gets weird because the Tones on Tail thing happens. So there's a side project Daniel Ash does once he starts to get more openly frustrated with the direction that Bauhaus is going in and Peter Murphy's kind of egomania and whatever. So Tones on Tail starts, and this ends up paying returns a little bit later, and Colorbox comes together. This becomes really, really important because Colorbox ends up becoming one of the first and most signature like sample bands. And they do the only #1 that 4AD ever has in 1987, which is Pump Up the Volume, with other people under the name Mars. Anyway, so it's all building. You can see the majority of the releases are the same bands, more and more stuff over and over again. So 4AD's mission is not like, let's sign every cool band in England. It's let's continue to try and break our bands bigger and bigger. And that is very different from the way a lot of independent record labels worked. And because it would just be like, who do you know and who do they know, and it just kind of goes in all kinds of weird directions. So, like, Creation is a perfect example of that. Creation Records is just like a scenester label started by a fanzine type kid in Alan McGee with friends with Bobby Gillespie and knows all these people, and they've got all their really awful student toss bands playing shit club gigs upstairs to 4 people, and they have all these wingnut obsessions with like outsider artists and whatever. That's the typical indie label story. 4AD is not that. This is a real standout that they put this out. They licensed it, I think, which is the Third from the Sun by Chrome. This is some intense fucking shit. I don't know if San Francisco's Chrome is like way out there, but if you don't know, 4AD was clocking that, and this is indicative again of what Ivo ends up doing with this Mortal Coil. So this is where he takes the modern English medley that they were doing and just does it himself because the band refused to do it. But then while he's in the studio, Liz Fraser from Cocteau Twins, one of their newer signings, comes in and they do a cover of Tim Buckley's Song to the Siren. This is completely like, it's a decent independent, it gets noticed in England, but like it doesn't become what it becomes until like a decade later. Like when American alternative people, because they couldn't get it, it was really hard to get this on in any way on import for a long time. When people finally hear this and it gets played on MTV, I'm not sure if this is the This Mortal Coil. I don't, was it on Lonely as an Eyesore? There, anyway, something happens in the late 80s and they cut a video for Song to the Siren, or they re-release the original film or whatever. And that's when it starts. But people still couldn't really get it. And it's kind of funny that this thing, this absolutely iconic, you know, in as much as the Massive Attack's Teardrop, you know, this is one of those Liz Fraser things that's become like canon for alternative and independent music. And yet it was just this one-off, you know, the first example of Ivor Watts Russell just being like, I'm going to screw around with one of my band's songs because they don't want to do it the way I want it to be done. Really weird anecdote. Anyway, at this point, Cocteau Twins are starting to get it together. You know, for me, the Sugar Hiccup is really where Musette and drums and Sugar Hiccup, they're starting to kick the Susie out of the sound. Because they started as a Susie and the Banshees clone. Let's not even front. I mean, yes, she's a totally unique, the most unique singer probably ever. But like in terms of Robin's guitar and approach to songwriting and whatever they were doing, they're just like, you know, really obviously into the sounds that Susie had going, that John McGeoch had going. They're all, you know, they're up in Grangemouth, like they're in this completely effed up Scottish like gas town. I think the whole town is a refinery. Like it's really, they come from really fucking rough circumstances. There's a famous anecdote that in the town Cocteau Twins are from, only half the town would have power for half the year. They would like switch it. Like 6 months of the year, where you live has power, and the other 6 months they don't. Absolutely fucking nuts. But and like in the 70s, like in the it's just like, wow, that was that recent. And I mean, look, I for all I know, that's an exaggeration they told in an interview, but like it's supposed to be pretty fucking rough. Anyway, it's very grim, says someone who lives very near to it. Thank you for the confirmation. And so, yeah, so when do we get, well, Garland's comes, that comes back, So again, they're coasting sort of ish off of Melt With You. And you can see that like in 83, there's just not a ton going on because they're so focused on learning how to do PR. They've had a band blow up with a big hit and they have no idea what to do about it. Beggars does, but 4AD sort of doesn't. And so they get sort of distracted, and they're also starting to put out albums, and because that's how you move the market and get your bands moving. And that takes so much more time. Even if they have the money essentially on loan from Beggars to do all this, just the process of putting an album together back then is an extremely time-consuming process. And you can see they're focused on it. So Colorbox does a kind of an EP. They were big fans of EPs. This is like a really early kind of like, you can see it's indexed under Left Field on Discogs, which is funny. But yeah, it's the Colorbox ends up coming through really hard. So after all this and the success of, well, certainly the critical success at home of the Tim Buckley cover, demonetized. At least the color's inverted. But anyway, anyway, yeah, Inland in Tears. This is a big problem when this happens because this is the album that gets you Song to the Siren, and it does pretty well. And this is kind of frustrating for the other bands on 4AD because it's like the guy running your label is spending most of his like. It seems like his shit is getting as much attention as bands, and like that seems a little bit off. It's, you know, the second record is the one to me that's the second, this Mortal Coil record is the one that's actually relatively really strong. This is okay, but he's got this thing with covers. He's doing a lot of covers on it, and while they're good, can't sing. If you don't have a guest singer on the track, absolutely forget it. And that doesn't really change. The kangaroo cover, yeah. So I mean, this is kind of his thing. Like, he's like, I'm gonna goth up classics. I'm gonna do this new industrial, dark, ethereal is the word, right? Thing. And Cocteau's completely sync at the exact same moment with the album that totally launches in them. And the first song is called Ivo, right? But the thing is like, apocryphally, it's not actually supposed to be called that. She's not singing that because she says it sounds like Evo, which is not how, his name is really supposed to be pronounced. I've called him Evo a million times. Lots of people have. It's supposed to be Ivo, but like, the funniest thing is the joke is that she's not actually singing Evo. She's singing some other nonsense word, and they just called it that. And who knows why? There may be an interview where it's some in joke about him, but like, this is the album that completely locks everything down. You've had Bauhaus, you've had really weird, sketchy album covers and design decisions. Like, 4AD is kind of all over the place, figuring things out. They get this big pop hit with I'll Melt With You. And look, the cover of that album, After the Snow, that, definitely also shows kind of the arrival of Von Oliver's design sense here with V23. But in terms of the way we think about it now, you've had some big releases building up to this point, but really Treasure is the one where like it goes off, and it's immediately followed by a beautiful 12-inch, the Spangle Maker. This is just like, I mean, that is some serious 4AD artwork right there. It's also two of like the best Cocteau songs ever, Spangle Maker and Pearly Dewdrops Drops. I mean, that thing is just, oh my God, what a record. I mean, unbelievable. And so, they've got their sort of focus here in this whole period on the bands they're working on. And Nikki checking in. Oh, maybe I should have done the baggy one. I'm saving the baggy one for Sunday because, we'll get the UK heads. Wow, it's already 7:30. Sorry, Jesus. And then, so those two things happen in 84. And then the other thing that happens, and apologies to huge Wolfgang press fans, but I'm not going to go too deep on them, is Dead Can Dance. So this is really the problem. A lot of people did not like this band. Like, a lot of people on a lot of bands on 4AD were sort of irritated by how like Foofy and Renaissance Fair and Literal and folk head Gaia, Stonehenge, Dead Can Dance's early records were. It's a little bit much. They have, there's aspects, particularly of the debut, where it's like, you can feel that 4AD is trying to kind of sculpt them into a more goth, anti-Australian discrimination. Yeah, there's that too. But you can feel like really heavily that they're kind of like trying to get them to sound a certain way. And there's this tension in the early stuff. And God, this is such an iconic album cover though. Within the realm of a dying sun. I mean, I'm sorry, Summoning of the Muse. It's, what this sounds like. If you don't know, you can find out real quick. Now, as much as I'm popping off about the fact that Dead Can Dance were kind of, let's just say, up their own ass, they become this absolutely phenomenal, syncretic, genius fucking act right after they break up, because they're a couple. So when they break up, all of a sudden they just like go absolutely fucking nuts, like in this Peter Gabriel way, on Into the Labyrinth. I mean, you want to talk about bottoming out in terms of overt medieval. Like, I mean, it's pretty fucking bad. The Garden of Zephyrus, like, oh my God. But then they like, when their relationship ends, it becomes about the music in a way that before it's been about sort of the storytelling, you know, not to be a shithead about it. Like, they've been a very literal storytelling. Yeah, it is LARP music for sure. And they have, you're making a good point too. They've benefited, but also been frustrated by the fact that in the mid-'80s, the period I just clicked away from, 4AD starts to get a knock as being a new age label, which is principally down to 2 releases. So maybe we'll come back to Dead Can Dance. But after 84 and this kind of, you know, they've had this pop hit, they get Matt Johnson's record out, and then these 2 things happen that kind of screw with their rep in 84 here. So Cocktoes start to get really ethereal on these 2 EPs. These covers are just incredible. Echoes in a Shallow Bay and Tiny Dynamine. These 2, like, all of a sudden people start thinking 4AD is becoming a new age label. Even though these aren't new age songs. Pink Orange Red is one of my favorites, but really they're offset by what is actually kind of a regressive EP that gets stuffed out at the same time, which is confusing because IK Guinea sounds like Treasure. This is a fantastic EP, and all these EPs are collected in a box set in the early 90s, which I had back when it came out. But yeah, this whole run of Cocktoes leads up to 2 big releases that kind of trip them up. So you got Colorbox coming together and doing kind of beat-based stuff. Then you kind of tie off Bauhaus because they're broken up. Love and Rockets is going to come out direct on Beggars. They're not even, because they're not bothering. You get the absolutely epic Bauhaus compilation 79 to 83. Like, one of the most, if you could get this original vinyl, oh my God, it's just so iconic and great. And in England, I'm sure you'll be able to more easily in the States. But what really screws things up is the Moon and the Melodies and the way too over-the-top, ethereal Cocteau Twins record, Victoria Land. This is literally an ambient record. It's ambient guitar. In the early 2000s, there was this mashup bootleg that like everybody had, which put, I think the drums from, was it Protection? Or was it even Teardrop? No, it wasn't Teardrop. They took the drums from, I think, some Massive Attack thing and looped them and put the Thinner the Air under it. And it's phenomenal. That MP3 is probably on YouTube right now. Like, I probably could pull it up. Let me see. I might be able to do that because that would be funny. I don't know that everybody will have remembered that one, but like it was definitely a thing. It doesn't. Yeah, someone's calling it the Massive Attack mix. This might be what I'm talking about. Let me check. Yeah, this is it. So someone did this and like put it on, you know, YouTube. I'm sorry, there was a YouTube. Someone put this on like Napster or some shit. And it's the Thinner the Air. And like that blew up huge and was informed, you know, by how big Teardrop was becoming. Like Massive Attack was huge. They were big. But like in America, that stuff, it really struggled. Like considering how massive Portishead was, Dummy was. It's, you know, Massive Attack was just, I don't know if it's that there were so much more, you know, English, you know, having Tracy Thorn and like other singers. Yeah, it's Protection. Yeah. But like, you know, the way those Massive Attack records were so instantly enormous in England, is kind of strange. And so what I'm saying is that like Teardrop blows up way after, Mezzanine, and anyone, you know, would have heard it. And I just remember in the MP3 trading days, you know, there was a platform called Audio Galaxy. In that period, a lot of people were like, this was going around and people thought it was a real song. They thought it was like a real like Cocteau Twins song. And I was like, no, this is Protection looped over. Anyway, the mashup era, the freelance Hellraiser era, actually. But anyway, So Victorialand is followed right on the heels by the Moon and the Melodies. Well, one of the people here, that's the tape head. You'll want to find this. That's not going to be cheap. Oh, are you kidding me? Oh, 20 euros for a promo cassette of the Moon and the Melodies? Somebody better be clicking buy. You better get that. I don't care if you're in the States. Pay that shit. Are you kidding me? I've never even seen this shit. Somebody better be taking this down right now. I want to see a buy. I would. That's nuts. I mean, I'm not right now. I'm fucking paused on buying anything, but like, somebody better be taking this down right now. That's nuts that they're only asking that much for that. Don't let me pressure you into spending money, but yeah. Anyway, this is the real entry, and again, like, hi, can you tell this is on 4AD? Just a guess. And this is another one that is so weird because the song, whatchamacallit, the Ghost Has No Home gets sampled, and I'm totally fucking blanking. I was one of the, like, so it starts off, See Swallow Me, Why Do You Love Me is, oh my God. I mean, everything on this is phenomenal. But this gets sampled in, God damn it. Somebody, come on, in the chat, because I've posted about it before. Something really enormous sampled this, and I can't remember off the top of my head. Oh, that's frustrating. But I was like screaming about it when it happened. God damn, that's frustrating. Dettinger. So this is a song I always like hype to people. And it's this weird standalone cut by this, like, you know, compact artist, Dettinger, and he got away with this. Like, nobody knew this was him. This was the Cocteau Twins, rather. I got the wrong track up, don't I? Yep, I have B1, sorry. It's B2. But anyway, yeah, here it is, hold on. Yeah. This is one of the most beautiful, like, he does stuff to it. He phases it, he burns it down. Like, he absolutely changes it, but what he does to it, he gets that, like, kind of, you know, Boards of Canada did it too. It's that like dying motor sound, and he applies it to The Ghost Has No Home from Moon and the Melodies. Always killed me. And it doesn't do anything. It's just a glitch song that just loops that for 7 minutes. I mean, the funny thing is I did the same thing. But yeah, I mean, that's this song. And it's got like saxophone and piano and stuff, and it's like, it's just total Eno. And so, like, this is what I'm saying. At this time, they're really getting a rep that they're turning into a new age label, and it's a problem. It actually hurts them, and it really takes essentially two things to break them out of it, which is Pump Up the Volume and Pixies. So like, this is probably the bottom of his goth impulse coming through, which is Clan of CMOS. Yeah, wow, this is some truly, this is where I break with all notions of goth, is Clan of Xemox and, you know, Darkwave and what becomes like Cleopatra Records in the States. Anyway, so what was I going to say? No, that's the reissue. The next 4AD needed Pixies so badly. Yeah, they did, because of this. And they also did really indulgent shit, like the Voices of Bulgaria, Le Mystère du Roi Bulgaire, or whatever. This thing is absolute legend. But now it's like, okay, are they a world, like, record label? They uncovered and reissued this, like, phenomenal fucking thing of this unique, you know, totally singular, cultural artifact. And it became like a, New York cocktail party talking point at one point. Like this is Paul Simon's Graceland, like mid 80s, Keith Haring, like Africa, the whole world, everything. Like there was such a chic, non-Western music thing going on. And 4AD totally fucking jumped on that with this record. I mean, look, I'm not trying to say it was a cynical move. I'm sure it's something that they had loved in the 70s and were, excited and proud to bring this absolutely astonishing, unique cultural artifact out. But I'm just saying it kind of hurt them. And it really waylaid the label. And so as it starts to get really gothy and new agey at the same time, then Byrne had already, he doesn't totally incorporate High Life until Naked and Nothing But Flowers, which is Christiana by Nico, the only truly kind of good to great thing that comes out under the This Mortal Coil name. Again, it's Martin McCarrick. He ends up in Susie and the Banshees right after this. Actually, I think he was already in the Banshees when they did this record. But it's like the 4AD party. Everybody come down to the studio, Ivo's down, we're going to cut some tracks, blah, blah, blah. Nigel's there with Vaughn and their, 23 Envelope. They're doing their art design. You got Simon Raymond from Cocteau Twins. There's some really good shit on this. They do a version of Tarantula, which is a early color box kind of breakbeat tune. Well, not breakbeat, but it's like an early drum machine dub. It's got like a huge fucking drum machine. It's so good. Like the Tarantula 12-inch is an all fucking time release. Absolute masterpiece of like proto dub into hip hop kind of thing. That's what Colorbox was living, and they didn't always kill it. But Tarantula is the one. And there's this really beautiful ethereal version of it here. I forget, I'm sorry who sings it, but it's not Ivo, it's a woman. It's not Liz, I'm pretty sure, because Liz from Cocteau Twins sings on, what does she sing on? 16 Days, Song of the Siren, obviously, and Another Day. Yeah, she's only on It'll End in Tears. She's not even on this record. It's I just, I didn't have time to go through all this. But like Strength of Strings, this to me is like the song. This sort of, if you want to like get a sound of Ivo, that is, exactly what he wants to put out. And I just think it's just a great piece versus Red Rain. There's some rough shit on this. There's always rough shit with Ivo because he's just one of these, I don't know, there's something about him. There's just something about the guy that's like, he's that guy. Like, and he always got under Robin Guthrie's skin, and he's just doing his own thing. And like, if you hear interviews with him, he's kind of posh, comes off as a little posh, and he doesn't seem like he should be in a band and doing music, and yet he stubbornly is, and he's using all of his own band's musicians. I mean, a few years after this, he uses Kim Deal from the Breeders and Kurt Ralph from Ultra Vivid Scene gets pulled into it. It's silly. Oh, here's a good one. Excuse me. The Pink Opaque. That is a really, really important landmark. Flowers of Romance is my favorite world music record. So this is the Pink Opaque. This is the original 4AD of it, but it's the, whatchamacallit, the Relativity import. But yeah, so the Pink Opaque is really important because it gets to America. This is the first time anybody in America in college and whatever hears Cocteau Twins. Honestly, it's really like Lorelei Treasure might have been around, but like this is the one. This is the catch up. This is the compilation that brings Cocteaus over. It's all the best stuff from those EPs and the really early records. And you get that little Cocteau Twins figurine appears here, and that ends up being on the cover of that infamous cloth box set of the 10 EPs that Capitol puts out in 91, I think. But yeah, Pink Opaque is a landmark, similar, just exactly the same way Bauhaus 79 to 83 is. If you're talking about, collecting and getting a kind of a quick flavor for 4AD and for their principally biggest bands, those two compilations are your answer. And Pink Opaque has since been reissued. I think it was pretty horribly remastered even recently. and when was that? It was like 2014. Yeah, I think this is absolutely awful. So you may want to avoid it. You want to get the original. I mean, in this case, if you can find, any of the European or Japanese ones, that's your money, but good luck. There's no way you're going to find that shit. But I mean, this thing has all those songs I was talking about. The original Relativity CD, there's some copies here. Looks like £7 all day. I don't know. The original CD is wonderful, consistent, the artwork, and it's the original mixes. And it's just, this has just got all that early stuff. Pearly Dewdrop, Spangle Maker, Wax and Wane, IK Guinea, Lorelei gets taken out of Treasure. It's just a really obvious, overt courting of like an American new audience to try and convince them of, the commercial prospects of Cocteau Twins. It's essentially like an international reboot. And, right after that, you get one of my favorite Cocteau's releases, which is Love's Easy Tears. The A side of this, Orange Apple, is like one of my favorite Cocteau's cuts of like ever, but so is Love's Easy Tears. And it's just such a gorgeous, like, amorphous ambient type of, Vaughn cover. This 12-inch, I hunted this down forever. This thing goes for absolutely stupid ass money, but it's a beauty. I should have pulled it, but I was rushing to get this even on tonight. Those Eyes, That Mouth too. Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing, the Size Smell, these are both great tracks. It's just like, to me, these are such capstone, like this tops first wave Cocteaus ends here and peaks here at the same time on this 12-inch. It's the fucking one. And then after that, things go nuts because 4AD has a #1 single. This is an absolute global, worldwide phenomenon. Pump Up the Volume, which is featured and gets out there as part of the Bright Lights Big City soundtrack in America, an incredibly successful, not at all, Michael J. Fox vehicle, where they tried to push him away from being a teen comedy movie goofball into like a serious actor. They tried a couple things for him, but it just didn't happen. So this is a collaboration between Colorbox and A.R. Kane, right? I'm fucking totally. So A.R. Kane is like in one studio and Colorbox is in another, and they don't even like talk to each other. Basically, A.R. Kane has a song, Colorbox has a song, and they just give them to each other, and they just try and destroy them. Like, it's almost like they hate the other band's song and they're trying to make it their own. It ends up being one of the biggest singles like ever, and it's one of the biggest singles of '87. Like I say, it goes to #1. It does mad business everywhere. It's a total fluke. Exactly. It made no sense, and it was straight up a 4AD record. I have this CD single, which is regrettably probably the worst art ever. But the thing that I love about this is Anatina. If you've never heard this, I constantly talk about the DSLR videos I did like 10 years ago. I did a video explicitly about 4AD, Mars, and the late 80s explosion of, this label. And this has, for me, like one of the best opening minutes of like any song ever. It's astonishing. The drum machine sound that they got is just absolutely insane. And that's not it. Hold on, that's the other one. That's it. Like for 87, and like listen to what happens, like Kevin Shields taking notes. I think so. I mean, the idea that that's 1987, I still think is absolutely ridiculous. I don't think you can say enough about how, and that's the B-side, because Pump Up the Volume is like the signature answer to the evolution of hip hop away from, you know, Curtis Blow, the Breaks, even Run DMC. Like first wave gold, like I don't know if they call it golden era or whatever the phases of it are, but like the first, you know, initial post-disco hip hop, it starts to become more complex, technical. And, you know, you're about to get like EPMD and you know, acts like that. And Pump Up the Volume, just, it's the most perfectly timed thing that's like ever happened. And it takes 4AD completely out of like step. They have no idea where they're going after that, because it's just like I Melt With You all over again. They're just playing catch up. They cannot figure out like how can they, because when this happens, you're like catching knives. You're catching falling knives. You've got to get the money. How, like, we're a fucking indie label. FM radio play in America. What the, like, how do I get paid for that? I got to register with BMI. They get drawn into essentially the legalese and the administrative overhead of having an enormous #1 hit. And it definitely screws them up. And when you combine that with the themes I've been talking about of kind of Ivo's self-indulgence with this Mortal Coil, of the encroaching of these heavily goth bands like Clan of Xemox, like Dead Can Dance, Robin Guthrie and the Cocteau Twins start to get really fucking pissed off. They're not happy with the relationship and what the attention they're not getting. And so that, the final piece of that is he hears Pixies. Gary Smith, who's just passed away here in Boston, he's found Pixies and he's found Throwing Muses. And Ivo's like, this guy has a really good ear. And so that relationship starts. This is before Gary starts kind of working with Billy Bragg. Initially, him and Ivo are kind of like, the same way I started 4AD 6-7 years ago, I want to start an American branch to get all these American bands. Yeah, Jack Your Body, Jackmaster Flex, that was the other thing, like Farley, all that. There was so much stuff coming out of, you know, I mean, you got techno and house and the response with the Jack Your Body shit in England, like that whole period. Pump Up the Volume, the idea that I mean, you also have Cold Cut, like there's so much going on, like Say Kids, What Time Is It is another signature cut from around this time. If you want to learn about the beginnings of sampling, you got to go back to the art of noise and beatbox, and I mean, this could go on forever. But like 4AD is there for all of it. The thing is that they don't get a hand in it, despite Colorbox and Tarantula doing really well. Yeah, Bomb the Bass too. It's the idea that 4AD, for all the work Art of Noise and ZTT with Frankie Goes to Hollywood and Relax, all the work all these other hipper labels are doing with sampling and with, like, you know, what at the time would have been called like urban music or crossover. The idea that they would come out with the signature fucking 12-inch of the entire period and just coat everyone else off. It's so hard to explain how fucking strange that is. Like, in terms of the history of what 4AD was, what they were actively trying to become with all this goth shit. The fact that in the middle of that, you know, A.R. Kane, this band that's essentially signed because they need their own Jesus and Mary chain, is able to put out this 12-inch that fucking changes everything. So, you know, I'm going to stop it here. We're teed up really nicely for a part 2. I don't know if I'm going to do it Sunday because I was intending to do it on Baggy for fun. And like, look, this is really just a history of 4AD more than anything about collecting CDs or records of theirs, because almost nothing on 4AD is particularly affordable, except for His Name Is Alive. So if you want to get yourself prepped for the next one, you can get pretty much the entire recorded discography of Warren Lefebvre's His Name Is Alive on CD for probably $15 on Discogs. Almost all of their CDs are like $2 every day. And this is a big 4AD story. We'll talk about His Name and Throwing Muses and Belly and Pixies and all that other shit. This is kind of phase 1. That's all I got to here in an hour. So yeah, well, I mean, I could honestly, I don't think you could do 3 parts, but there's certainly, when you get to Lonely as an Eyesore here, this is a good breaking point, and Pixies come into the frame. So yeah, Lonely as an Eyesore is enormous, hugely important comp. Similar to Pink Opaque, this is something that gets 480 bands and work around into the States more through college radio. So thanks everybody for coming out. This was fun. Again, it really was just kind of a history thing. Oh, I didn't get into Frasier chorus. Oh, I let that slip by. We'll hopefully see you Sunday, and on Sunday we'll go through, I think I'm intending, if I stick to it, to go through Baggy, because I remembered some Baggy bands that I forgot about. And there's definitely a funny vid there, but it's 100% going to be for anybody in the UK and EU. Like, the obscure Baggy bands didn't even come over here, and by that time Nirvana blows up, so they didn't. Yeah, do get Le Mystère de Bulgaria, the Bulgarian women's choir. That record is phenomenal. I have a sealed cassette of it. I've had for a long time, and of course the CD. It's amazing. I mean, you think about all these world signature moments in world music, introduction to the West. You know, the things Peter Gabriel did with Passion. You know, Graceland, even the Akira soundtrack, and that's one of them. It's really, really important. Anyway, all right. Have a good rest of the evening, or extremely late evening if you're outside the States. And we'll see you Sunday at 2 p.m. EST.